Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Stern. Thank you for coming to this talk. I represent Dangen Entertainment, a publisher based in Osaka, Japan. We publish indie games, and we've been in business for about 6 years. Some of our most famous games are projects like Minoria, Crosscode, Iconoclasts, Bug Fables, One Shot, and very recently we launched Dungeon Drafters and Hunt the Night. I consider us very fortunate to have gotten to where we are, starting from very humble beginnings. We were a startup company, and I think we've enjoyed really fortunate success. So I'd like to talk today a little bit about what it is that we're looking for in the games. I think one of the greatest strengths is that we curate quite well. We've really received a certain amount of recognition for that. We got selected as the number 13 publisher by Metacritic a couple of years back, which sandwiched us between Nintendo and Square Enix, which is incredibly humbling. And what that said to me was that we were doing some things very right in selecting excellent games, working with developers who are incredibly talented. And some of those games are games that we sought out, and we wanted to work with those developers, and we reached out to them. But in other cases, the developers approached us. So I'd like to share some of my experience reviewing pitches and what it is that I look for, having done this job for about a decade. And at this point with Dangen, we review about 500 pitches a year. So I want to preface this to an extent by saying that all publishers are different. And I bet every publisher also says that, but it really can't be iterated enough. Some publishers simply don't review certain genres of games. We're not picky in that way, but that is totally a thing for some publishers. Some are looking for very specific visual styles. Some of them are focused on, almost anything. I think there are enough publishers out there that there's a niche for almost any kind of concept. Something else worth noting is that this reflects our outlook at the moment. It has changed from the past, and I'm sure it's going to change in the future to some extent too. But at the point now where we have grown, we have been fortunate. We're doing more funding than we originally did when we started out, and but we're still like indie ourselves. We are independently owned, and that means we're responsible for our own success. So we are still pretty careful with our with how we consider budgets and what games we want to work on. I'd also like to say that if you have any questions, please ask them anytime. I'll pause to be able to answer those. This is a pretty unstructured talk, and so there's plenty of room to answer questions on the fly. So the first place that I want to start is this is assuming that you're reaching out and pitching via email. It's not so much about in-person pitches. I guess that's because after COVID, I've been reviewing most things through emails or online somehow. So I want to start there. And the first thing is that I recommend researching and pitching the right people. I would say a small percentage of emails that I get feel like very catered towards like Dangen as a publishing label. And you can usually tell by the way that the mail was written. First, whether it was written for me specifically, or whether it was written for a large group of publishers, maybe in a list or something like that. And it's really worth knowing, at least in the first round. I think there are ways to stage this out, have multiple pitching stages, so that maybe in the first round of pitching, maybe send personalized emails to specific publishers whose portfolios you think your game will fit into thematically, genre-wise, gameplay-wise, aesthetically, that kind of thing. And it always catches my attention. I always notice if somebody seems to know our portfolio and references the game specifically, and then if I look at the key art, the screenshots, the video, and then while I'm playing the build, if I'm like, if I'm looking at those things, it's obvious to me that they really thought about that and were like precise in how they evaluated like how their game is going to fit in our portfolio. I think it indicates a degree of like professionalism and like due diligence, which is reassuring, especially if you're going to be investing in a project. But it also, I think it saves both teams some legwork. If a team is very specific in their pitching, I think the chances of a conversion rate into a conversation or a potential like partnership is going to be higher anyway. And it can save time for publishers, which they may or may not remember, but later on. But it does happen sometimes that you'll later on see a name that seems familiar. You're like, oh right, I remember talking to this person before. It wasn't a fit that time, but like we had a really good like experience conversing. So all of those things really matter, especially like being specific. I recommend pitching directly, not necessarily in not necessarily. Never. I would recommend not using mass emails, at the very least in the first stage of pitching. If there are publishers that you want to work with, make sure to send them a personal email. Look up their email, like their website, and find their contact email address somehow, and then send them something directly rather than in like a CC or BCC. In fact, the next point that I have here is don't ever use BCC. You can't tell who else is in the BCC, but it feels so impersonalized and like there's not a lot of effort going into the approach. And it starts off with at least for me, I mean, maybe other people are different, but for me, it starts me off with like a very negative first impression. I have seen situations where other publishers are CC'd and I can see who's in there. And there was a time or two where some of us were like, hey, fellow scouts, how you doing? And that was kind of funny, but I don't think it was for the best for that pitch. So I would recommend like avoiding those kinds of situations. Getting directly into the actual pitch itself. I think a lot of pitches have too much information. And I tried to write out some notes on where I look first. The first thing that helps is showing great art immediately. One of the best pitches I ever got was Lost Ruins. Lost Ruins has been a huge success for us. The developers have earned a lot on the project, and we've just had a great partnership. And the first thing that caught my eye was it was key art. It was an illustration. It wasn't even in-game art, but it was astounding. It was really good. And I saw that and I was like, there's almost no chance that the game art is not going to be great too. And it was. It was at a very strong pixel style. It was using Unity particle effects that made it stand out significantly from other games in the genre. But initially I saw the key art and I was like, that's great. I wonder what the game looks like. I saw screenshots of the game and I was like, that looks great. I want to see a video. The video looked awesome. But like each time I'm getting more and more interested. But the initial like because any publisher is always going to have like a lot of different like things going on. I'm sure they're all reviewing a lot of different pitches. And likely the person who's reviewing pitches, that's not their only duty. So they're going to have other things going on too. You want to, as quickly as possible, like guide them right into what's going to make them most excited. So great key art or screenshots into GIFs, into video, into gameplay is an excellent flow. I would definitely recommend having a video easily accessible from the email, embedded or linked, so that immediately the publisher can click that and start watching. Likely, especially if they're busy, they may like flip through a little bit to get like a very quick idea, then rewind and watch the whole thing if they're already like seeing something that they like in it. But it's an important like aspect of giving them important like quick information that they can use to evaluate and understand. Like I need to, like they're going to perk up if what they see is something that they like, and and that helps to lead directly into a more fruitful conversation. I recommend keeping the deck itself slim. Make sure that the budget is clearly visible. Like I said before, like this reflects our own current outlook. We're still growing and we're investing more than we ever have. And I think in the future, we're going to be investing more than now. But budgets are going to be a concern for every single publisher. And making sure that information is easily visible and in a place where they expect to find it. Usually it's on like the second to last page of the deck or something like that. They'll probably go look there. Make sure that those things are easy to find. And it helps if you have like something quick that they can parse out and understand quickly, as well as like a more detailed breakdown of how the budget's going to be spent. What are the personnel? What are their specialties? And if they've shipped games, then sometimes it's helpful to give some information on what have they worked on in the past, so you can get an idea of like what the portfolio is for the team. I think coming back to the idea of there being too much info in most pitches, I would recommend focusing on what is the most important stuff about the game. If the story is the most important thing, then I think it is worth focusing on the story. Loretta is one of the other best pitches that I've received, and it started off. The art looked nice, and I was curious because of the art, but at the same time, that wasn't like the single best selling point. The best selling point was a single line that said it summarized the story as a woman in 1944 self-crafts her own living nightmare by murdering her husband and has to live with the consequences. And I read that and I was like, that's a great elevator pitch. I have to know what the story, how the writing is in the game. And I played the build, and by the end of the demo, I knew that I wanted to work with this game. I actually don't remember what the rest of the pitch was about. That the almost singular focus on the story for that one, and that is like almost all of the gameplay in the game, was what I needed to know most in order to understand and care and like start to fall in love, which is exactly what you want. So if the game is about gameplay, if it's about puzzles, make sure that that's like a central focus and highlight it, displaying like why this aspect of the game is so good that people will want to play it and remember it for that. And then I think it's fine, I think, to summarize some of the other context and let publishers ask questions. They will ask questions if they want to know more about story for a game that is pitched as an action roguelike. They'll ask. But I would give maybe a single slide dedicated to 3 or 4 other points about the game, just giving a quick highlight without spending too much time on it. I think that I definitely see a lot of pitch decks that upsell sales forecasts in a way that I don't think is realistic. And the common trend, I think, is for pitch decks to compare a new IP. It'll be like an action roguelike, and in landscaping the market for action roguelikes, the metric will tend towards it'll be like Hades, Curse of the Dead Gods, and Dead Cells, or something like that. And those are all like absolute smash successes, especially Hades is like one of the most popular games of the modern era. It's better to pick, I think. I would pick games that are successful to a degree that correlates to your budget. So that if your budget is $200,000, pick games that are honestly reflective of what the game is like, but at the same time have sold an amount that shows the publisher would probably make an ROI, but without like upselling to the extent that that it feels like everybody's going to get rich immediately, and it'll be like the biggest game ever. I think those kinds of techniques are probably it probably works in the reverse for most publishers. And I'd recommend, just focusing on the main question that a publisher is going to have is, will we break even? And the second question that they'll have will be, how profitable can it be in the long term? So stay realistic and keep it relevant to the budget. And lastly, on pitches, a themed deck is good. It just looks nice and it feels professional, and it can show off like art direction for the team. Art direction has become, it's always been important, but I think it's like the bar for art has gone up so much in recent years that a lot of games have strong art hooks. And so like beautiful pixel art, for example, is not its own unique selling point to the extent these days that it used to be. So it's kind of like an expected baseline at this point, but it is important to show like excellence and competence, and theming a deck can help to do that. And it can also like indicate to the publisher like, the UI might be cool. They could already do this stuff with the pitch deck. Coming to the build for the pitch, my feeling is that the some builds are a little too elaborate, and some builds have not enough information. The main thing that I want to know when I review a build is what could I reasonably expect from the product later, and does the build that I'm playing indicate that that the core concept is going to be exciting. Ideally, if I have to like extrapolate or like guess at what else will be in the build in the final version of the game, it's best if that's stuff that's kind of like easy to imagine and not necessary to experience. A great example for this was Dungeon Drafters. When I first played Dungeon Drafters, you could not play inside the town. Now that it's released, the town introduces the whole extra macro loop, which is excellent. But I'm really familiar with strategic roguelike games, and at the time, like Dungeon Drafters leaned a little bit more towards roguelikes anyway. So I understood what that would be like, and what I wanted to know is how clever are the cards, how fun is it doing combos. And as I played the game and got used to that, I was able to ask some questions to the developers. I learned, wow, combos are really clever. It makes me feel smarter than I am. It's really satisfying, and I can kind of guess what the other macro stuff is going to be like. And we committed to funding the project before we reached the point where we saw what the macro loop would be. But the stuff that was harder to imagine was in the build, and that was really important to us. If progress systems are important, then the publisher might want to know what that experience is like. Hades is a good example of that. I think if I was trying to pitch Hades to a publisher, then I'd be like, I would definitely want to focus on how does the narrative develop over the course of runs. For example, there's a lot of different stuff in Hades that does stuff like that. If skill item or upgrade varieties are important to show, like for like the gameplay, then show the fun stuff in that. If it's upgrades, show how upgrades can get fun. If you're to come back to the Hades example again, boons get really exciting, and it's the variety and how they apply to each of the different weapons and how that like interplay occurs when you're min-maxing in a run and choosing what you want to pick up. And so I've played like action roguelikes before that have a system where picking up upgrades is important, but the upgrades were mostly like numerical changes or something like that. It didn't show like a variety in gameplay and how that can be exciting. And I think that would have been like a stronger way for that game to explain itself in the initial build. This is a minor point, but very important. A lot of publishers will want to play with a controller. I recommend always having controller support in a publisher pitch build. I've played a lot of builds that don't have that. And finally, just to wrap things up, and thank you for your patience as I went a little over time. A lot of publishers do talk about hooks and USPs. I think there were several year-long period where hooks were especially a large part of the overall discourse. And I used to talk about that all the time then too. It was something I was very passionate about. But as there have been like more releases and a lot more like high quality releases in recent years, I think truly unique designs have gotten even more uncommon than they were before. And I think now that there's just there's either as much or more opportunity for for a truly unique game to get overlooked. So I don't think that like the USPs don't necessarily guarantee success. They are really important, and I think you can see when a game really has it. It's hard to define in words like right now, but you can see it and feel it. Oftentimes that's really obvious. But I like to fall back on advice that I heard from Koji Igarashi one time, which was that rather than making what you think that somebody wants to see, or that end users want to play, or what you think a publisher might accept for in a pitch, I think it's less risky to make something that you love and understand very deeply. If you love something and you're making something that is rooted in like your experience as a gamer and a developer, you'll make your best iteration of that. And with games like Dead Cells, it's clear that they know and understand that design. They love it. They played those kinds of games forever, and they made their best version of what they were going to make. And I think that'll show with whatever somebody's trying to make. The better they know it, the better they love it, the better that their art is going to be. And it comes across not just to publishers, but to fans and to everybody else too. And that's everything that I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening to this talk, and I hope it was helpful for you.